This is Tim with Shop Tour Reviews, a little bit different video format today. What we're covering is replacing the displacement on demand feature on our GM LS style engine. This specifically is a 6.2 liter, but it's going to be the same from the 4.8 liter all the way up to the 6.2. And Comp Cams even makes a replacement kit for the new LT series as well, the new direct injection motors. So everything from trucks to Camaros, Corvettes, you name it that the LS was in. Most of those had the displacement on demand options where it drops out the cylinders to supposedly help gas mileage, but after a while they decide to start dropping lifters, and potentially that ruins camshafts, which ruins engines. So as soon as we heard a tick, we knew what it was and knew it was time to change out, or actually in our case, we're eliminating the displacement on demand. So Comp Cams has complete displacement on demand, or DOD, elimination kits. So you can buy the complete kit for your LS1, LS2, LS3, or L92 like we have here. This is a 6.2 liter in a GM SUV. But again, a lot of this is going to be the same on any of the LS series motors as long as they've got displacement on demand. Now we're keeping the variable valve timing, so we'll keep the VVT. We'll install their Comp Cam's cam phaser kit, so it will lessen that that variable valve timing from the way it is from the factory, but it'll be able to utilize that better with their cam profile. We're also installing a Comp Cam Stage 2 kit. By the way, here's the cam phaser we're taking off right there. And be careful, there's a big spring in there that can come unbound. Now we're taking the heads off, and in a second here, once we get the heads off, you'll see here the lifter trays, and then we'll see the funky lifter for that DOD, and you'll see it come out right here. So that long spring, that longer lifter there, and we'll compare it to a regular lifter. So that longer lifter is on those one of those cylinders where it drops that cylinder when it reads a certain amount of oil pressure when you're going down the road. So we're going to be eliminating that. We're going to be changing out this camshaft as well from Comp Cams and putting in a new camshaft. So we've got the heads off of our L92 or 6.2 liter engine. Going to look at a couple of things here. Number one, we'll be cleaning them up here in a little bit, but wanted to go ahead and get these springs off and get these valves out of here. By the way, these are, like I mentioned on L92s, you got rectangular ports, so they're not the cathedral port like you see on a lot of the 5.3s and LS1s, things like that. So the rectangle port's going to flow a lot better, a lot more, again, for that big 6.2. Now, one of the cool things about Comp Cams is they have their valve spring compressor tool. And this is made out of beefy cast iron. It's not aluminum. In fact, I think they guarantee this forever. And model number, I think, is 5462. So basically, that's your model number or part number, if you will. So we're going to go ahead and use this tool. So first thing is, this will actually go either way. So depending on your clearance issues, you can put this either way, but see you have a recession area here, so you can use that, and that fits very well here on these keepers, on these beehive style LS series engines. One of the things that says pretty critical is that you really lube the bolt that's actually doing the pressing here. So this bolt here, so they say put quite a good amount of assembly lube on it. Again, because that's going to be doing the heavy lifting, if you will. We'll go ahead and start this one. And then you're just going to use the included bolts here. And they've got long ones as well as short ones. Looks like the short ones will do for us. And include these washers here. So you can see quite a bit of adjustability with that one elongated hole. This will actually work good on just about any engine, basically. Okay, with that on, now we can go and tighten this. Yeah, Just lost the keepers like that. But anyway, use a nice magnet tool to actually pick those up, unlike what I just did. Good thing we'll be replacing the keepers anyway. Next one. That works much better. So this is a very useful tool to be able to remove all these valve springs and keep valve locks and retainers without damaging any of them. So you know, it's worth the few bucks to buy something like this to again have the right tool for the right job, and it's something that you can have forever. And it's an easy tool to use. We're using a little impact driver here to drive the bolts down and then to compress the springs as well. And you can work two valves at one time. So any of the LS motors, this is going to work great on. So again, highly recommend that tool from Comp Cams. Here we're just cleaning up the valves a little bit. So chucking them in the drill, using a little Scotch-Brite pad, some brake cleaner, some degreaser. Clean those up pretty good. Some of the more carbonized ones may take a little more effort to clean up. And then we've also lapped the valves. So this is after lapping them. You can see the nice little burn marks there on the right-hand side, but now they're cleaned up very well after lapping them for a little bit. So this is the Comp Cams Beehive Spring Micrometer. Now what this is going to tell us is maximum valve height. And the reason we want to know that is for a few reasons actually. One of the main ones is we don't want coil bind. In other words, we can't, if we got a really high lift camshaft and our spring height and our spring seat and basically at maximum lift, they don't equate, or there's not enough room there. You'll get coil bind where the coil springs actually get too close to one another and actually break a spring. Got a lot of harmonics going on in there, as well as just the sheer friction and feedback of the spring and the strength of the spring. So anyway, all of those things, geometry as well, come into effect, and especially when you're talking about 4, 5, 6, 7,000 RPMs. So if we don't have that valve height correct, we can cause coil bind, and we can also break things and that sort of thing. Also, when we're looking at valve height, not only do we want to know if kind of we're in that window, we also are dealing with, we've got, in this case, this is a LS style V8, so we got one camshaft, so that's a plane, if you will, and we need to make sure the other plane, which is going to be our actual rocker arms and whole valvetrain geometry, is operating on equal planes, or parallel planes, if you will. So not necessarily equal, but parallel planes. So if we've got one height set up, we want to make sure that all the others are within a certain amount of distance. And for that number, we're looking at about 20 thousandths to be in the kind of across these 8 valves from intakes and exhaust and all these. We want to be within 20 thousandths. So what we're looking at from the valve seat, so on an aluminum head like this, you're going to have a valve seat like that. A lot of times cast iron heads may just have cups in there or actually use the cast iron. And then this is where we're going to use our micrometer, and then we're going to actually use, so basically this is taking the place of our spring so we can actually measure that max valve height, and then we're actually going to use a retainer there, and then we're going to use a couple of keepers or locks, whatever you want to call these things. I call them keepers. I think the correct term is locks or valve locks. And then we're going to use the correct valve. So we know this is the actual, driver's side head, because my crossover passage is here, therefore I know that's on the front of the head. Here's the intake side, so therefore this is the driver's side. So we're looking at 1, 3, 5, and 7 cylinders. So this is actually number 7 on the exhaust port. So let me find number 7 here on the exhaust port, which would be right here. Give it a little dab of oil there, just to make sure where we're coming up through the valve guide. So now we've got our valve up there. We want to close this keeper down. That valve's going to fall out of there. I know it is. Okay. Got our valve locks in there. Now I can just kind of push the valve down. And then I'm just going to now, like we're unscrewing something. So we're expanding that micrometer. And as it seats, so you'll feel it kind of grab there. Now we want to find our numbers. It's actually down here. And it is 785 thousandths. 787 thousandths. I'm going to go in here. I've got me a nice little sheet here. And so number 7, exhaust. What did I say? 7. So 787. So we're going to do this on every one of these. So we're going to use that on each one of the valves to actually check that that maximum spring height. So we're going to move along here. And by the way, I think we said 787. It's actually 1.787. So it's an inch and then 787 thousandths, or a little over 1 3/4 inches. So here's where we're going along and checking all those. And now we're going to set up and actually now we're going to install all the PosiLock valve seals here from Comp Cams. So we're going to oil these a little bit, get a little bit of oil on them so they don't get cut. Make sure you don't cut these when you're putting them on the valves. Sometimes they can have a sharp edge and cut them. And now we're going to use our tool again, like we took the springs off, to put the new springs on. And these are the new, these are Comp Cams Beehive springs, and just a great set of springs for stepping up that performance and being able to use still a 600 lift camshaft without using dual springs. And that Beehive spring just has a great profile that seals very well, doesn't float at high RPMs. I believe this camshaft we're installing has got a red line at around 6,600, which is a lot for a heavy SUV like we'll be running it in. So probably won't ever worry about that top end. But again, it's got that ability to run up there at that higher RPM, where the stock one's probably going to die somewhere around the 5,500 range. So this is installing that new roller camshaft and getting it in there. So with that high lift, you got to be careful when you're going through these cam bearings. Even though on the LS they make it easy, so these things install rather easily. Where they're on an older small block, this is where you'd have trouble with that big of a lift. You'd have a lot of wiggling around getting it through the cam bearings. So not a problem here though. Just putting a little 30 weight oil on here to lube it up, because again it is a roller camshaft. No need for assembly lube here, especially when we're going to run this within hours of getting this put together. So again, just installing some 30 weight oil on it and getting it in there, spin it around a little bit, and get it seated in well. Now it's time to install those new lifters. So we're going to put those in their lifter trays. And again, these are the new Comp Cams lifters. So they do not have, we're not replacing those displacement on demand lifters. So they'll be all conventional roller style lifters from Comp with new lifter trays in here. So they should sit in there quite well, quite firmly, and stay in there the next time we need to pull those out. No need to do anything other than just kind of have these soaking in regular old oil, and the roller should be good to go and ready for assembly. Now installing the head gasket pretty easily when it's marked right there on the front for the front of the engine. So make sure you do that. Line them up on your dowel pins and push those on and get ready for the cylinder heads. We are using kind of factory style multi-layer head gaskets. Those are great head gaskets, so no need to go on anything different than that. Now we're installing these heads with the new Comp Cams valve springs, and as well as the new seals on there. So we'll be good to go and ready for just about a brand new motor here Also using new torque to yield fasteners. So all brand new bolts that come with the kit, come with the DOD delete kit from Comp Cams, and just taking our impact and running it in very, very gingerly here on a low setting to just basically touch the bolt against the cylinder head, not to torque it at all. So we're not really using any force with the impact, and then we're coming back and using our ratchet to again kind of cinch it down, if you will, and get ready to do the first round of torquing. Now going back and getting those 10 millimeters that are on top there near the valley cover. So we're going to do our first round of torquing, and then once we do that, then we'll come back and do the angle as well to fully stretch those bolts on the heads. So here is the new valley cover that takes place of the old one. This is off the Displacement on Demand. So this is what the bottom of the valley cover looks like. See all those oil passages? And these are the solenoids, whatever, that actually bolt to that, hook to that control, or to that pinout right there. And basically, it opens and closes based off the computer, allowing oil to go in and either collapse those injectors or to pull them out of the way, if you will, so that it runs on only 4 cylinders. So all that contraption is removed and replaced by this, and of course the new camshaft and programming as well. So we're starting to button up the top end of this, installing that valley pan cover, running in with our impact, and now torquing these down. And then next we'll be installing the rockers as well as the push rods, and really starting to button this thing up and get the valve covers on it ready for assembly. So just touching the tips of these in some 30 weight oil just to kind of get some lube on them. We'll be starting this up very quickly after getting it installed. So putting the rail on and now putting these rockers on here with the rebuilt trunnions. We did use the Comp Cams kit to rebuild the trunnions on these. Put new needle bearings in here. That is a weak spot of some of these LSs are the trunnions, but otherwise these stock rockers are great rockers with that trunnion upgrade from Comp. So no need to buy new rockers, just replace the trunnions, and also they have a easy to use tool to change those out as well. Use a little bench vise and their tool and quickly change out the trunnion bearings on these GM stock rockers. So here we are putting each one of these on and torquing them down and rotating them, making sure on the flat spot of the cam, even though these are really not necessary, if you will, on the LS engines, but it makes sense if you get this on the base circle of the cam before you torque them down. And also you want to make sure that you do have the stock height on there. If you don't, make sure you don't need a longer or a shorter push rod, which we didn't. All of ours measured out quite nicely here. So getting this finished up and turn it over a few times just to kind of watch and make sure that there's no binding, make sure I'm not feeling anything, and as we're rotating this, as well as making sure that all 8 cylinders are opening and closing the intakes and exhaust without problem. And now it's time to move on to our timing chain and get this timing chain and gears put on, as well as the new cam phaser in the existing cam gear, if you will, and as well as the tensioner here. So this is what's going to keep tension on your timing chain so that as it wears, it's going to keep that slack out of it, keep it from being sloppy. Here's where we're removing this to safety bolt on this cam phaser, because it will come apart, and there's a big spring in there that's coiled all up, and will make a big mess and create a bigger bill for you if you don't keep that safety bolt on there as long as possible. And now we got to line these dots up and make sure that we're in time here. So not really going to explain all that. Pretty easy to find information about that if you haven't done this before. But again, as I mentioned, be sure with that cam phaser unit there, you see I'm kind of holding it together to make sure it doesn't come apart. And then you've got a feel for the dowel pin in that camshaft, especially with this VVT cam. And then that special cam bolt goes in there But again, you want to make sure everything's lining up before you put that in there. And you've also got to get something to hold that while you torque that bolt to where it needs to be. So taking a wrench, you're just firming up. And then here's where I'm doing something that a lot of people may scoff at this, but just heating this up to about 200 degrees, which is not going to hurt any seal. So you can see I'm using my IR temp gun here. But just again, see this to be 200, 220 degrees, just to expand this a little bit, because this is an interference fit harmonic balancer that goes on the snout of the camshaft. There's no keyway on these like the old small blocks and big blocks. This is just on the LS. It's just basically, like I said, an interference fit, and you want it to go on there quite a ways, and then you can pull it on with that bolt. But otherwise, you can strip a bolt by trying to install those with too short of a bolt. And by the way, there are longer bolts that you can get in aiding doing that, or you can buy the install kit. Now it's here where we're installing this back into the to the engine compartment. Not going to get into the details here. Again, this is GM SUV. That's going to change whether it's a truck, SUV, car, you name it. But again, as far as the setup, the displacement on demand kit on the LS, all pretty much the same way. And really great kit from Comp Cams. Once we got this in, we did have to do some tuning on it, so we had our tuner tune the DOD out of it, as well as so basically you can go into the tables and tell it to turn off the DOD and also limit the VVT, or the variable valve timing. But really woke up this SUV, where it got a lot more top end than it used to. Still has plenty, if not more, of the low end and mid range as well. But again, just really increased that RPM curve on the top end, and really woke this truck up. Again, it's still a big elephant, so it's not going to be a rocket ship, but we were very impressed with Comp Cam's kit, and look forward to doing more. So check them out at compcams.com, and also keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a great day.